Hey everyone, so now that we've got the support piece off the front of the airplane there, it's time to focus entirely on the landing gear. Some of you may have seen the video on the Behringer wheel upgrade that I'm doing. If you haven't seen it, head over there and take a look at that as to the reasons why I'm doing it. The Behringer axles are rectangle on the mount as opposed to the Matcos are square. So I'm having to backfill the holes with some fiberglass epoxy to fix any rigidity issues and not weaken the landing gear so that I can re-drill the holes. I mentioned in the other video that I'd run short on some rivets for the wheel or the main spar section of things here, and that came in, and so I just cleaned up the skin a little bit and got those on. So it's just kind of looking over things, getting ready to start mounting the wheels and see where they all go. Oh, and actually, this is kind of cool shot. I got the fuel lines all run to the sides of the fuselage as well. So that was part of the other things that I needed to get done once the side skins went on. The other thing that I've needed to get done was some click bond mat attachment points for the zip ties, and those take about 24 hours to dry, so I got those put in place so that I can use the zip ties and get that scored away. So with the rivets in place now, I'm finished up getting those wing root guides onto the airplane, and was able to finish that up pretty quick. So anyway, so this is just to give a refresher here. These are the Matco on the left and the Behringer on the right, and you can see the size are, it's different. So I need to backfill those holes with an epoxy, and then there's the shim that I had a new one made that was rectangle, and it actually matches the Behringer axles. So with the epoxy having filled the hole, I've got now effectively a solid piece of landing gear at that point in time, and was able to re-drill new square holes to match the axle for the Behringer and get those in place. So this is just a video that goes around the actual initial mount itself. So that's what it looks like. And you can see also there's a little bit of a dimple there on the actual landing gear itself. Take a real close look, and I decided, it's kind of a weak point, and there's an extra bolt that's real close to that. So I went ahead and did some backfill on that. I think a little bit later in the video I show what I did from that perspective to backfill that hole and or provide some more strength to it. The other thing is, so I had to cut the bolts shorter. For whatever reason, they ship you bolts that are a quarter of an inch too long for the landing gear mount. I went ahead and trimmed those off so that they match what's on the plans. And then this is me working on the other side of the landing gear. This one, I didn't get it quite aligned right, so I had to revisit it, basically re-epoxy everything and go back in and try it again. But you can see I'm just dribbling in the epoxy. The duct tape that I've got there works great as a stopper, and then I just let it cure for 24 hours. So while I'm waiting on that, it's time to start working on the nose gear. I've got the engine mount and then the nose wheel or the landing gear itself, and just starting to get all that together. The bolts that go into the actual shaft there were just a little bit too narrow on the yoke itself, so I had to tap those out a little bit so that I could get the bolt through. But this is super easy. I mean, you just grab the bolts, put them in place, torque them up, put the torque line on there, and move on with that. It wasn't really too difficult to do this phase. Now it's just, I think the hard part about it is that it's difficult to tell which direction the yoke needs to go on, because there's a slight difference. It's not marked well at all, and it's really subtle. So I had to spend a lot of time looking at that, and then also get the wheel pant guides mounted as well, because that's part of the attachment at this point in time. So just kind of blasted through that. And it just took probably an hour or so. And then there's a series of washers and very, very, very small bearings that go on the shaft, and it's like it's like the washer, bearing, washer, and then you have to use a lithium grease. I've never even heard of lithium grease before this, so went to the auto parts store and asked for it, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, it's there's the whole aisle of it sitting over there." So I grabbed a tube of that. This I think the hardest parts on this project are getting things to fit well that move. The fixed stuff is really easy, but this gear, or this nose section here, I did the first fit, and of course when you put it together, you want to put it together like it's going to be the last time. Unfortunately, the first time together, the clamps and the guides were so tight that no matter what I did, I could not turn that shaft. It was horribly tight. So a friend of mine, Aaron, who's finished his sling, he had a 2-inch dowel that was all set for helping sand out and you'll see it in there. That there's a piece of, between the blue tape, there's some sandpaper, and that's meant to sand down the guides enough so that the shaft there will turn inside the clamp pieces. And I mean, I probably have abbreviated the number of times that I've taken apart and put back together this section. I got really, really good at doing it quickly. So it just took a lot more time and effort than I really thought. I thought it would go together pretty quickly and then be done with it, but the tolerances were just way too narrow for it to be a smooth moving nose wheel turn. And there are some videos out there on how smooth it should turn. Basically, it's like on the plane, on the ground, you should be able to just kind of kick the leading edge of the wheel and it should just churn. So there's very little resistance there. So, on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off. I mean, I went through a whole tube of the lithium grease there, just prepping, getting it all ready, putting it together. Nope, not loose enough. Taking it all apart, having cleaned it up, because you got to really effectively sand down that shaft so that it allows for the landing gear to turn, or the nose wheel to turn with very little effort. I ultimately wound up getting some sanding discs from Dremel that did a much better job, and I can't imagine trying to use that 2-inch dowel to actually smooth it out enough to be able to do that in one shot. So this probably took me about a week and a half or so to just really get it working well. I tried a number of different methods, and of course, you don't want to take too much off with each swipe of it, so it was a tiny little bit every time to get it to a point where it turned. So there's a close-up of the little cutout. That cutout is for a bolt that's on the Matco, and of course I'm not using them. So what I wound up doing was putting in some mandrels that were left over from some stainless steel rivets, drilled them in to give it some additional surface area on the fiberglass itself, and then poured the epoxy around that. And then that closed that section out, and that allows for the epoxy to set in there and grab it real nice and tight. Lastly, this is the throttle quadrant, and for whatever reason, Sling sends you the wrong size valve. So I got a new valve that fit the angle irons, and listen, it just doesn't set in there well. I had to open up those holes a little bit to be able to mount. So I called up a buddy of mine that does 3D printing. I said, here's what the scenario is. Took it over to him, and he started building up a mount point for this. And it took him about a day to do this. In the end, this was just the sample sections that he was using to get the fine tuning of the material, and it's a very, very hard 3D printed material, and that's the final sample one. And then the final one was going to be black, so it doesn't, bleed through any weird colors. And then that's the bed that it sits in, and then the final piece when it's all together, and it does not move. It is perfect. So special thanks to Jesse for helping out on that. Throttle Quadrant is done at this point in time. The next video, you'll probably see it on the wheels. Thanks very much for joining, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.